There's a parcel of Dark Lives Matter challenging going on in my range. Presently, sometime recently, I'd type in anything else. I want to reveal that I completely back the Dark Lives Matter development. Be that as it may, this is my individual supposition that the plundering and revolting are not affirm, and anybody partaking in those acts ought to not be related with the quiet nonconformists. But tragically, blended in with the serene protesters are the bandits and agitators covering up in plain locate. Many nights back, numerous stores and houses within the town following to mine were broken into and victimized, and a lot of car windows were crushed. There were rumours from the cops in our companion bunch that our town would be a target the following night. We remained up a little afterward than regular the following night for that reason. Whereas observing a motion picture together as a family, we had to quiet the TV when we listened hollers from outside. We checked out the window and saw an expansive bunch of youthful men with veils on parading down the road. They weren't holding dissent signs or anything. They were fair being uproarious and, by the sound of it, reviling a parcel. But they didn't show up to be harming any property, so we went back to our motion picture. After that, my guardians went to rest. I remained up afterward in my room playing a video amusement with a headset on, so I seemed conversation to my companions. Inevitably, I developed bored and tired and turned the framework off and went ground floor to urge a glass of water sometime recently bed. As I passed the small half stairway to our cave on my way to the kitchen, I looked down and saw something enormous sitting on the carpet by the window. I went down the stairs, and when I picked it up, I realized what it was. It was a bit of glass from the window, broken but all taped up as on the off chance that to create the glass smash less demanding or calmer. I ran to my parents' room to induce my father. When he saw it, he called the police. The reaction time was absurdly long. My father said we were fortunate the line wasn't active, as 911 calls close us have skyrocketed. When the police came to look the house, it didn't appear like anything was stolen or anybody was within the house. They had to reply to another call inside 20 minutes, but they said to call back in case something else happened. My father and I picked a rest within the cave for the rest of the night to avoid anything else from happening, so my mother went back upstairs. Time rolled on gradually, but eventually I think my father fell snoozing. A huge blast of wind hit me within the comfort through the opening where the glass utilized to be, causing me to open my eyes and see at the window. No one was out there, but for a few reasons, I thought I listened something coming from upstairs. So, I went up the half flight of stairs, thinking possibly it was my moan. When I got to the kitchen, I proceeded to listen clamors from over me. I strolled upstairs, and the clamors were still coming from over me. What else was over? The loft. I went to the upstairs capacity room, which had the attic door. I unobtrusively opened it, uncovering the brief stairway to the storage room. This can be when the commotions halted. I didn't flick the light switch on. I fair tiptoed midway up the stairs to tune in. The overwhelming quiet was frightening, considering I was hearing commotions from up here fair a moment back. I held up on one of the middle steps to listen something. At that point, I felt the hairs on my head being moved. Someone's fingers began running through the twists in my hair, and I listened this deep, evil cackling sound. I let out a cry for offer assistance from my father as all the certainty promptly cleared out my body, and I was overcome with frightfulness. I ran out of the upper room to meet my father midway down at the kitchen. He didn't go up to the loft. He once again called the police. Whereas we listened rearranging and pounds from over us, the cops once more came and, upon entering the loft with their weapons drawn, were able to locate someone. They came out of the storage room with a few unpleasant ancient man with a veil on, looking at my family and me and chuckling as he strolled out. When the cops inquired him within the back of the car what he was arranging on doing, he essentially conceded right absent that he'd seen all the plundering going on the news, that he needed to connect in on the fun. He made his way to our upper room since, he said, that's where individuals store their most important belonging. Based on the way the man talked and acted in common, you'll tell he was certifiably crazy. He told the cops that he was alone. Strangely sufficient, he replied all their questions no issue. But once more, this fellow clearly had a few screws free or lost completely. Feeling him brush his hand through my hair like that will likely frequent me for a long time, possibly indeed life. And one thing is for sure, I do not feel secure going in that storage room any longer. My father once told us a genuine scaly story of his from when he was in his 20s. When he was still living with my grandparents, he lived another entryway to this more seasoned couple in their 60s. One winter, the spouse Margie following entryway went lost. The spouse thumped on their entryway and inquired my grandparents if they'd seen her, but tragically they hadn't. No one had. Clearly a couple of days afterward, my father was out at the stop playing football with companions. That's when it begun to snow. They played in the snow for a whereas until it need to be as well much. At that point, they'd all went their partitioned ways back domestic. When my father got domestic, he realized his guardians were gone. My father begun the chimney and went to his room, which was adjoining to the living room, to toss his stuff on his bed. At that point, he went to require a warm shower. He got out from the shower. He thought he listened coming from the living room exterior, the lavatory. He opened the entryway a split in his towel. He said, "Mother." The murmuring ceased, but a squeaking sound proceeded. My father threw on his dress within the lavatory and strolled out into the living room. There, in my grandpa's ancient shaking couch chair, was Margie from another entryway. She looked straight at my father and said, "It was so cold, I required to urge warm." My father ran another entryway to urge the spouse, but when the two of them returned to the living room, the couch chair was purged. Margie was gone. The two of them looked the full house together, calling her title, but she wasn't there. Presently, this much of the story was sufficient to crawl me out as of now when my father told it to us, but it didn't conclusion there. The truly frightening portion didn't happen until the following day when Margie's dead body was found within the man another door's crawl space, where she clearly stumbled and cut her head open on a sharp question. He as it were found her because the scent got to be so agonizing. He noticed it from the carport. The thing is, the body was regarded to have been dead for its slightest 3 days. However, my dad saw her within the living room fair the day sometime recently. To this day, Dad believes he saw the apparition of Margie in my grandparents' living room that day. My dad's not one to form stuff like this up. When he to begin with told us this story when I was 9, let's fair say I didn't get much rest that night. My companion Keith has an uncle with dementia. Long story brief, his uncle more often than not lives with his grandmother. But she was in Florida with a few church bunch for the week, and Keith was going on a trade trip. So whereas he was gone, he contracted me to house sit. This included observing after and taking care of his uncle. I'll call him Uncle Mick. Keith would as it were be gone for 2 days. On the primary day of my house sitting, I mostly just hung out within the terrace perusing and tanning, or within the living room observing TV. I cooked twice, and each time I made additional nourishment for Uncle Scratch, but I never saw him come out of his room upstairs. I went up to thump on his entryway gently and tell him I made nourishment. I listened a snorting clamour on the other side of the entryway. I accepted that was his way of recognizing me. I never really met his uncle. Strangely sufficient, we weren't presented when Keith enlisted me for this small work. Uncle Scratch was completely mindful of my being there. At slightest, that's what Keith said. He never cleared out his room to eat, whereas I was within the living room, so I went up to Keith's save room for the night. I cleared out the entryway broken open, so I may tune in. I inevitably listened at entryway, dab the lobby opening and unsettlingly fast and overwhelming strides moving down the lobby and down the stairs. Seconds afterward, I listened the same strides surge back up the stairs and back to the room, and the entryway pummel closed. It was truly a small, terrifying, hard to clarify. Fair the escalated of his footsteps, like he was maintaining a strategic distance from me or something. The another day was pretty comparative to the primary. I made 2 dinners and cleared out the nourishment on the counter for Uncle Nick both times. When I was laying within the patio once more, I came back in to see the plate was purged, so I figure he was truly maintaining a strategic distance from me. I went back out to tan a few more, and when I thought of it, I looked up to the room Scratch was remaining at, and there he was looking at me through the window. I think when he'd taken note of me, he ducked down. I felt so awkward that I collapsed up the blanket and went back interior and up to the save room. It was a firm, one more night of this, and I'd be domestic. I made supper that night and cleared out him another plate. As I strolled up to the save room, I taken note his room entryway was open presently. To begin with time I'd seen that. Perhaps he was getting to be less modest. I went to brush my teeth and go to my room for the rest of the night to deliver him his space. I was having a harsh time resting in spite of the fact that I fair wasn't tired at all. Whereas laying there within the dull, I listened a brief squeaking sound coming from interior of the room, indeed over the clamour of the fan another to me. I sat up and looked around, still able to somewhat see within the dull room. I didn't see anything, more particularly, I didn't see Uncle Scratch. I was getting neurotic, truly. Why was I getting to be so creeped out by him? I lay back down on my side, confronting the divider another to the bed. I overlooked the small sounds I thought I was hearing in my head for the foremost portion, but when I listened a really blackout moan, I sat up and turned off the fan to tune in. I listened breathing. I turned to the distant right side of the room by the work area, and there he was, sitting on the work area chair, turned to me. I shouted in fear, and he came up to me going "sheh," and secured my mouth with his hand. Within the minute, I thought he was attempting to choke me, so I pushed him off of me and ran to the closest lavatory to bolt the entryway. I tuned in as I listened his hyper strides surge back to his room and hammer the entryway. My heart was beating interior my chest. I called Keith and told him approximately it. He sounded like he wasn't indeed that stunned. That's the terrifying thing. He told me it's best I rest within the lavatory with the entryway bolted. And when he said that, it said to me that his Uncle Scratch is possibly unsafe, which alarms me indeed more. I rested possibly 3 hours max that night on the bathroom floor, and within the morning that quickly stuffed my backpack and swam out within the terrace for Keith to return. He paid me additional for what I had to bargain with. I recommend that he get his uncle a few genuine offer assistance, since I think he has more than dementia, and I still do not know what his eagerly were that night.